and welcome to the YouTube channel Undoubting God, where I share evidence for the God of the Bible, defend Christianity, and discuss issues related to the Christian faith. This is the second video in a series of short videos that provide evidence for the existence of God. In today's video, I want to share with you 2 reasons why DNA points to the need of a divine decider, what we call God. Did you know that DNA is essentially a biodigital program? It's true. According to genome.gov, DNA is a molecule that contains the biological instructions that make each species unique. DNA, along with the instructions it contains, is passed from adult organisms to their offspring during reproduction. Now note the word instructions. What does that mean? How do we get instructions? Where do instructions come from? Logically, if we have instructions, there must be an instructor. Can instructions just come from thin air, from luck, by chance, from evolution? I think it's highly implausible. Think about it. Teachers instruct their students how to do a task. Parents instruct their children to do, for example, how to tie their shoelaces. And a manager of a company will instruct the new employees on how to do their job. We always see when there's instructions, which is a detailed, list or detailed instructions on how to do something, you always find an instructor. In other words, there's a mind, there's information, there's a willingness and a desire to impart knowledge and information. So I think it's not implausible to suggest that instructions require an instructor. And in this case, with the instructions and information embedded into the program of DNA, that God is necessary. In biology, DNA storage is a fundamental concept. It's basically the way that genetic information is stored inside DNA molecules, which can be found inside the eukaryotic cell. Now let's briefly take a look at DNA storage and then see how DNA storage points to the need of a designer. Okay, so let's take the analogy of a cell as a factory. Let's look at that a little bit. Now, in every factory, there has to be a building, right? And the building has walls, both exterior and interior walls. So the external walls protect, and the internal walls give strength, but also divide up the workflow. Now, of course, within a factory, there has to be like a command center or like some kind of executive management department. They decide what work is done, when the work is done, how the work is done, and who by. So just in a cell, there's also, in the nucleus, that's where the command center is. Now, there has to be a production line, right? In a factory, all different types of production lines, just like in a cell. But in order for the production line to function, there has to be materials being brought in. So there's like a receiving department or receiving area where the materials come in, then they're sorted out and sent to the correct production line. And in addition, just in a factory, you've got like the shop floor workers, or maybe like the caretakers, is the correct word. They go around, they make sure that the workspace is clean and tidy, but more importantly that the machines and the production line is flowing well. So they make sure that the whole process runs smoothly. And it's the same thing in a cell. Now, we know intuitively that a factory is designed, right? There's absolutely a mind, a designer behind the design of a factory. How can all these workflows appear, all the complex intersystems, and there has to be communication as well. There has to be communication within the factory, within the cell, for everything to work. Whenever there's communication, there's a mind, information, there's a mind. Where there's a complex design and everything works together neatly, this screams out for a designer. We know that factories are designed, that products are designed. If we take that same logic and look at a cell, right, surely that also screams out for a designer. So DNA is divided into sections called genes, and these genes actually produce proteins, and proteins are required by the cell to function. Now, these proteins perform a wide range of tasks, and there are different types of proteins. So how do these proteins get made? Well, that's where genes come in. Each gene, if we take the analogy of a cookbook, is like a recipe within the cookbook. So there's a gene to make a specific protein. There's a different gene to make a different protein. So inside DNA, there's all this information and instructions how to create a certain protein using which particular gene. Now, think about it. That's amazing. I wouldn't call it a gene or DNA self-aware, but somehow it knows when a certain protein is required. It knows what gene or what recipe to use, and it knows in what quantity. So it's the when, the what, and the how. It has all these things combined into the genes, which is fascinating. DNA contains the genes. So there's the A, the C, the T, and the G gene. So the A, C, T, G. These are kind of like the letters or the building blocks of the DNA. And these can be put into many different combinations. That's how we get the different proteins and how we get different organisms. Even though every living organism has those same four letters, the A, the C, the G, and the T, but the rearrangement, the order of those will result in such a wide variety of life as we see it. We also know that cells can replicate. The cells divide and they create new cells from where they divide. So how does the genetic information, the DNA, the genes, etc., how does it get transferred from the previous cell to the new cell? Well, basically, this is where the storage element comes in. The information is copied, right? It's stored and then uploaded, I guess you can say, into the new cell. Now, there's one thing we should focus here. Whenever a cell divides and replicates, that information is copied. Kind of like if we copy something in a hard drive, and then often if we move it from a hard drive to another device, sometimes there's an error. Sometimes changes occur. And so there may be some genetic changes or mutations that result from the maybe slightly imperfect copying process. Now think about that. There are some genetic changes and mutations from the copying of the genetic material. But here's what we know. No added genetic material comes into being, right? There's no new genetic material. It's not added. It's just the same genetic material, but maybe slightly missing an instruction, right? And very often, these genetic changes, mutations, very, very often are detrimental and even cause death of that cell or the organism. So, in other words, these genetic changes or mutations, they never really improve an organization, and they never ever add genetic information. So why is this important? What's the implication of this? Well, if evolution is true, right, macroevolution I'm talking about here, macroevolution, which is start the whole process starting from a single cell that got into a bigger organism and bigger organism, until we get all the different, animals and creatures. We had the dinosaurs and the whales, whatever. Then we got the apes and we got the so-called humans. If evolution is true, according to biology, it can't be, because the genetic mutations and the changes never result in new genetic material. It's almost always detrimental. It's never an upward movement. It's the same or usually downward movement. So I think this is a real question mark about evolution. How can evolution be true, macroevolution, if the species, like if one species somehow goes beyond its own species, it has to have new genetic material, right? So I think that's a big, big question mark for evolution. So to wrap up the video, we've looked at two reasons why DNA requires a divine designer. First, there's information and there's instructions within DNA. And we know intuitively that information and instructions require a mind. And secondly, there is storage within DNA. And that storage is required to hold, to process all the information to create the proteins that are necessary for life and for a cell to flourish. So I don't think at all it's implausible to say that God exists in light of the evidence. So, if you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate it if you want to subscribe to the channel, share the video, like the video, comment on the video, and remember, faith is not fairy tales and God is real.